So hi everyone, welcome. We'll wait a couple of minutes, maybe a minute or so to get started, maybe let people join us. So yeah, I just want to say welcome. This is our Ask an Engineer Zoom meeting. Where you'll get an opportunity to ask our expert engineers on hand any question you might have about our water system or any other questions about DWA that you might have. My name is Sochi Pena. I am the outreach specialist at DWA, and we normally host our virtual events as webinars where we can't see everyone. So it's kind of nice to see some faces or at least some names, and we get to see who's joined us here. And since this is a meeting, I just wanted to let you know that we can see you and hear you unless you are on mute and you turn off your video. So we do ask everyone to stay on mute unless you have a question and we have called on you to ask your question. And, I know everyone's familiar with Zoom, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. At the bottom is where you can mute yourself and you can turn on and off your video. Down at the bottom on the left. And then also to ask questions, we're asking people to raise your hand, and down at the bottom under reactions, the little reactions button is where you can raise and lower your hand. And, we will monitor whoever has their hand raised and call on participants to ask their questions. And at that time, you can unmute yourself. And also, I just want to remind everyone that this is a meeting and we are recording it, and it will be posted to our website at dwa.org/virtual. And that is where we have all of our previous webinars. If you haven't, seen any, you can go there and you can find them all and you can watch them. So, yeah, so why don't we get started? I would like to introduce our expert engineers. We have David Tate on hand. He is our operations and engineering manager, and he's also a registered civil and professional engineer, and he's been here, I believe, about 16 years. We also have Ryan Mulhook. He has been here at DWA for 13 years, and so he is also very knowledgeable on all the ins and outs at DWA. And we have Ashley Metzger. She is our outreach and conservation manager, and she will be serving as moderator today. So yeah, go ahead, Ashley, if you want to jump in.
Hello, what an intimate group we have here today. Yes, our virtual events generally are quite a bit bigger, but we're happy to have the opportunity to have a more one-on-one experience here with you. So Patrick, thanks for turning your camera on. Others, Rick, Jamie, Chris, Michael, Paul, Kimberly, if you'd like to turn your cameras on, you're welcome to. We'd love to see some more smiling faces here. Thank you for taking the time to attend and learn a little bit more about what we do here, and specifically the engineering aspect. So what we'd like to do is, if you have a question, if you could just go down to the reactions button and raise your hand, and then we'll call on you and allow you to ask your question of the group. And so any hands raised so far? I mean, I'm assuming some of you folks have questions if you've joined the webinar today. If not, we can start out with one that I get quite a bit. We are often asked, David and Ryan, if Desert Water Agency can change the water pressure at somebody's home. Do you have any advice or information to our customers on that?
I'll go first. Generally, you cannot change the water pressure at a home. The static water pressure is dictated by the level or the elevation of the reservoir and the elevation of your home. So it's a fixed number. What can change is the dynamic head loss that occurs in a flowing pipe. So if you have a very small service to your house or a very small main, it might be possible to get some small increases in pressure, but generally the static pressure cannot be changed.
Anything to add, Ryan? I know that people are generally a little disappointed to hear that, but there are, you know, some instances in which folks call because their pressure is very, very low, and sometimes it's a failed pressure regulator. So that's something to look into as well. So Sochi's put on the screen here our pressure map that shows basically where you're located, and the city will dictate what the pressure you receive at your home is. And for anything above 80 PSI, they recommend a pressure regulation device. And that device will bring that pressure down to an appropriate level that will ensure the longevity of your private plumbing system. So Ryan, was there anything else you wanted to add on the kind of engineering side of the pressure question?
I would just add that we do have various pressure zones that are created by us adding booster pumps to our system, which can bring the pressure or the water up to higher elevations and still maintain a reasonable pressure to your home.
All right, and then Sochi also put on the screen just the picture of the pressure regulator. So you'll see this hose bib here, and Sochi, perhaps you can put your mouse over the pressure regulator component, the bell-shaped component that's in gold right there. That's the device that we're talking about that many folks in Palm Springs have on their house. And you know, those tend to fail. They typically last about 15 years. So if you have an older home, it's good to check whether or not you have a pressure regulator, and then think about the last time that it was serviced. And then it looks like we have a question in the chat, which you're welcome to also put your questions in the chat box as well. What feeds the Valley water supply? And then are there concerns about availability for the future? Awkward question. Frankly, I don't think it's that awkward of a question. This is something that, Ryan and I just got finished working on the urban water management plan, and we're in the middle of the sustainable groundwater management plans. And, it's something that we pay very specific attention to, looking at future water availability. I'd like to say that we're lucky compared to much of the rest of the state, which is experiencing very severe drought. And that's because, one, we have luck in that we're situated on top of a groundwater aquifer that's quite a large aquifer. And two, it's strategy and really prudent management for decades. That's the reason Desert Water Agency was established, was to bring water in to put into the aquifer to replenish what we pump out. So we have a photo to show you what a replenishment basin or recharge basin looks like, so that you can kind of conceptualize what it means to bring water in and put it into the ground. Because ultimately what we're doing is we're putting that water in there, letting it soak underground so that we can pump it up and folks can use it. So maybe, Ryan, could you talk a little bit about how our planning efforts, work with the different supplies that we have and the different considerations we have going forward?
Sure. So as Ashley mentioned, there are several planning efforts right now, but kind of a big one in the state is Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and that we're doing a plan update on. And that act is essentially to try and make sure those folks who manage and use groundwater are managing it responsibly and sustainably. And we're able to do that based on our primarily on our imported water. We're a state water contractor, and we import, we have rights to import water from State Water Project. Unfortunately, the infrastructure doesn't make it all the way to the valley. So we exchange that water with Metropolitan Water District for Colorado River water. So in addition to that water, which is the water you'll see at these spreading basins. We have obviously the natural mountain runoff in the area, and Desert Water Agency does have a few surface water rights to some of that stream water that we utilize to deliver directly and also recharge the aquifer even further, so that we have that storage in the future when we need it to pump out.
So this is a photo of one of our beautiful streams. This is Snow Creek. So some San Jacinto snowmelt runoff there. And then Sochi, perhaps you could bring up the cross-section of the aquifer so that we can kind of talk a little bit more about the aquifer itself, which is where the water has stored over, millennia and is stored today. So many people think of an aquifer as kind of like an underground lake, but really it's kind of the space between all of the different soil underground. And then we access it with wells as is depicted here for use, on the eastern side of the Coachella Valley in agriculture, and then urban areas throughout the Coachella Valley. And then of course there's recycled water use, where we, instead of additional pumping of groundwater, we recycle the water that has already been pumped up and used at various properties. David, could you talk to us a little bit about how your team identifies good locations for wells and what goes into drilling a well?
So generally we would like to stay away from the mountain. If you imagine the mountain slope continuing below the valley floor, if you go too close to the mountain when you drill a well, you'll encounter the mountain, possibly even before you hit groundwater, which could be disastrous, as that'd be spending a lot of money not to get the well, because our wells are generally drilled about 1,000 feet. So if you go out to the base of the Tockwitz Creek, or you look around there, you might see the mountain. And if you imagine the slope continuing down, we need to go out into the aquifer quite a ways to get down 1,000 feet. So we generally go for areas that are sandy, flat, don't like a lot of rocks when we're drilling wells. We want nice flat areas, easy to access, easy to maintain. That well there is one of our newer wells, which is really nice. That's over on by Smoke Tree Ranch in that area. And that well is drilled about 1,000 feet. We generally hit water around 200. So we have a little bit of a buffer in the well to slow down the water's infiltration into the well, and spread it out over a large area.
Thank you. The photo that we had up there was a really good reminder to us to remind you that, we do tours. So if you're ever really interested in coming and seeing this stuff behind the scenes, if you will, we should be restarting our tour program, hopefully in late 2021. We missed having tours in 2020, of course. So any other questions from the group before I get to some of the ones that I hear a lot and some of the questions I personally have? You can go ahead and type them in the chat, or like we said, you can use this, see in the corner, I've raised my hand. You can use that tool as well if you have a question. Okay, so I'll give you all some time to type your questions, but wanted to talk to you as well. And David and Ryan, I think you both have a lot of really helpful perspective on this question, which is, how do you decide which pipes in our water distribution system to replace? So, there's 425 plus miles of pipeline in our system. How do you know where to even begin when looking at pipeline replacement?
One thing we look at is the age of the pipe, the material, the amount of leaks that we've had on a pipe. Though we try to get to replacing the pipe prior to the leaks letting us know it needs to be replaced. I try to be proactive on that, but we have a running list of the number of leaks that a main has had per 1,000 feet. We keep track of it in that manner. And we just look at the material and the age, or those are the three considerations there.
Yes, and it's the bare steel pipes that tend to give us the trouble, right?
Yeah. One other consideration that we take into account is the cost to replace or fix a main. For example, if we have to go out on Indian Canyon, that can be a very expensive main to fix. So that, even though it might not have as many leaks, that'll bring it up to the list a little bit higher. Or if we have to go out on Vista Chino or Gene Autry, if we have a main that's leaking on a street that is extremely difficult to repair, it might not have as many leaks, but the leaks are costing us a significant amount of time and money. So we will bump those ones up a little bit higher on the list. So.
Yes, and Ryan actually did a project this past year. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges of these projects, but on Caballeros, which is a fairly busy stretch, and it happened to be between two schools. And we were really daunted by that and anticipating what impact that might have. But one of the silver linings of COVID was that project was able to proceed without those impacts on the community. But typically that is something we have to consider. So Ryan, can you kind of walk us through what some of the hurdles are along the process when you're replacing a pipeline?
Yeah, so that job in specifically, that was a 30-inch transmission main that needed to be replaced. And just to kind of tie it in to the previous pressure question, so those transmission mains are the mains that are utilized to carry the water from our well sites up to our reservoirs, which maintain the pressure in the system and also provide emergency water supplies. There's several steps in the process. As of course David mentioned, identifying them. Once they're identified, they go through design process, which basically consists of us evaluating where in the corridor we need to place the main, factoring in other utilities and potential other obstructions. Once that's done, we get a contractor out to install it, and then we need to coordinate with residents, businesses, and other folks, i.e. schools, as Ashley mentioned, and try and minimize the impact to all those involved and work within the schedules. This particular project, we actually got a little lucky in the sense that those schools didn't return to in person, so we were able to navigate that schedule a little more easily. But the COVID presented other challenges with delays on materials and costs and, the working environment. They couldn't, probably quite go as fast as they normally would because they couldn't be as close to each other and those types of things. So every project's got its own unique challenges, but that's the general guise.
That's really helpful. And I think that also reminds me, David, maybe you can talk about the challenges we're having with this year's pipeline replacement program, given all of the global supply chain shortages.
One issue we're running into is normally our contract requires the contractor to supply the materials from one specific manufacturer. If they say they're going to get the pipe in the contract from US Pipe, then we want it supplied from US Pipe because that's what the contract was. But that's something where we've had to give in and allow the contractor to pick up pipes from different suppliers. This is something that we're running into as the agency when we're trying to buy parts. So we know they're not fabricating a story about not being able to do it or trying to price shop or price swap or something like that. The agency is actually running into an issue picking up ductile iron pipe, elbows. Our current pipeline went out to bid a few months ago, and we haven't been able to start it because the contractor has not even been able to procure the materials to get started. Copper pipe is in short supply. Ductile iron pipe is in short supply. There's key components that are just not readily available. We can't get started. So it's going to be a big challenge. And we're hoping that in the next few months it clears up. But
yeah, that's a great testament to how every new project has its different challenges, and certainly things that you may not think affect your water service or the water agency can have a bit of a ripple effect. I did get a question via email. Someone was wondering what happens to the sewer water once it's treated. Is it all used for irrigation? Does it end up back in the aquifer? So maybe David, you could tackle that one, and I could chime in to help if needed.
Yeah, so the sewer that ends up at if it's in the city of Palm Springs, it goes to the Palm Springs wastewater treatment plant that's operated by Veolia. After they treat it to a secondary level, it's moved on either to percolation, where it goes into the ground, or it's transfers to there it is, our water reclamation plant, where we treat the water to a tertiary level of treatment, disinfect the water, and then we sell it to large municipal golf courses and private golf courses for consumption. So generally, we would like to reuse and recycle all of the water, but it depends on the year. One issue we run into is there's a bit of a mismatch between when the people are in town to generate the wastewater that can be recycled and when the golf courses need it. A lot of tourists come into Palm Springs in the winter, generate a lot of wastewater, but you imagine the weather's nice and cool, there's not a huge demand for the grass that needs it. But in the summer, people leave, or in the past have left Palm Springs, and the wastewater treatment plant flows have dropped down. But that's when the golf courses need a lot of water to keep the grass alive. So it's a little bit of a juggling act that we do.
It definitely is. And seasonality is something that's certainly changing. You know, more people are coming and staying longer into our warmer summers. So that helps a bit. And then the other thing that helps is back in 2015, we installed some shallow groundwater wells. And those wells actually can pump up some of that shallow water that is lower in quality, and it's actually very protective of water quality when we're able to use those shallow wells. Another question, suggestions for homeowners to recycle water for reuse around the home. So there's not really a lot of gray water applications in Palm Springs. I think that for the most part, the things that we've worked with on the conservation side, folks doing is, capturing water in the shower while it heats up in a bucket and then using that either in the toilet or throwing it in the pool or using it to water plants around the house. But there are some really fascinating applications that I've seen elsewhere, but in terms of what you can get permitted in Southern California, it might be a little bit challenging. But, when you traditionally talk about in-home water recycling, there are setups where folks take water that would normally be discharged through a drain line for a washing machine, and they could apply that elsewhere. You have folks that have configurations with a sink that goes over a toilet back. So the water they would use to wash their hands would then drain into the water they would use to flush their toilet. There's some really creative things that are being done. There's also rain barrels that folks use, which, we don't get a lot of rain here. So not terribly helpful or applicable. But there's definitely, around the house, folks tend to find the best way to cut back. They think it's doing something inside. I'll take a shorter shower, I'll eat on paper plates, even, I've heard people say. But the most impactful thing folks can do at home is to change their landscaping. So either, swap out that grass for desert landscape, artificial turf, pavers, patio, or to put in more efficient devices and appliances. And, Desertscape here in Palm Springs can be just such a beautiful way to augment the mid-century modern architecture we have. And, it can be very, very well done and colorful, and it doesn't have to feel drab. And, it's not your grandmother's gravel, front yard that you're thinking about. There's really, and I think so many people know this now, if you look at an aerial photo of the Coachella Valley from back in 2012 and compare it to now, you can just see the difference with how much grass has gone. So in terms of what you can do at home, that's probably your best bet. Any other questions for the group? We're not going to keep everyone longer than the questions you have. So if we don't have any questions, we can thank our engineers here and thank you all for attending and taking the time and be on our merry way. And you know, it's very interesting to see that we've had such a small group. I'm curious as to, now that the economy's kind of returned to normal, if folks are maybe less interested in doing these virtual events. So we'll have to kind of play that by ear, but maybe by a show of hands, and it can be either your real hand or your little digital hand here. Who has attended one of our webinars in the past? Anybody? Okay, so some of you are new, so that's good. That means that we're still talking to people that we haven't talked to in the past, which is great. And you know, for some people, this format may be more convenient than driving down to our office. I did want to remind everybody, our lobby did reopen today to the public, which is fantastic. We have been closed throughout COVID to the public. Our office has been open. All of our staff has been working since the pandemic hit back in March of 2020, but our office is now open. You can come in if you need to pay a bill, or, you know, if you need a consultation on something. But I did want to make that announcement since it is breaking news for us. And certainly if you want to learn more, stay on top of things, we have a robust website that has lots of information. You can sign up for emailed news notifications and keep your eye out for what we put inside your bill, whether you receive it in an envelope in the mail or via email. We also attach additional information in there with things like our pipeline replacement projects and frequently asked questions, you know, talking about water leaks and talking about trends and things on the horizon. So thank you very much for coming today, and we'll let folks know we're tentatively planning an emergency preparedness webinar for August. So if you go online to the website, and I'll type it in here again, so you can look at our past webinars and then look at the upcoming ones as well. That site will have the information for you. So thanks again for taking the time to be here, and bye everybody.
Thank you.